Have you ever experienced that moment when someone completely underestimates you? That split second when you can see the judgment in their eyes, the assumptions they've made without knowing a single thing about who you really are? Now imagine that person isn't just some random stranger. There's someone with a badge, a gun, and the authority to detain you. Someone who's sworn protect and serve, but whose actions are guided by something darker than duty. This is exactly what happened to Special Agent Maya Daniels on what should have been an ordinary drive home. But what started as a routine traffic stop quickly spiraled into a confrontation that would change multiple lives forever. Before we dive into this incredible true story of prejudice, power, and ultimate justice, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another video like this one. Your support helps us continue bringing these powerful stories to light. Music transitions to something more serious and suspenseful. Picture this. It's a warm summer evening in Richmond, Virginia. The sun is just beginning to set, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Maya Daniels, a 34-year-old black woman, is driving home after a long day at work. She's tired but satisfied, having just closed a complex case she'd been working on for months. The glint of red and blue lights in her rear-view mirror catches her attention. She checks her speedometer. She wasn't speeding. She signals and pulls over to the shoulder, already reaching for her documents, knowing the drill all too well. As a federal agent, she understands protocol, but as a black woman in America, she's also intimately familiar with the unwritten rules of survival during traffic stops. What Maya couldn't have known was that this particular traffic stop would become a flashpoint of moment that would not only test her training and resolve, but would also expose the kind of systemic issues that continue to plague law enforcement agencies across the country. This is a story of how one officer's grave misjudgment led to his downfall in a matter of minutes, and how Maya's professionalism in the face of prejudice ultimately made a difference not just for herself, but potentially for countless others who might find themselves in similar situations. Music builds slightly, so sit back and prepare yourself for a powerful account of what happens when bias meets accountability, when disrespect encounters dignity, and when someone who thought they had all the power discovers they made a terrible, career-ending mistake. Let's get to know Maya Daniels a little better. Maya isn't just any FBI agent. She's one of the Bureau's rising stars. After graduating with honors from Howard University with a dual degree in criminal justice and psychology, she joined the FBI at 26, quickly establishing herself as someone with exceptional analytical skills and unwavering integrity. By the time of this incident, Maya had already led several successful operations targeting white-collar crime and corruption. Her colleagues describe her as methodical, composed under pressure, and possessing an uncanny ability to read people. These qualities had earned her respect within the Bureau, though she often found herself working twice as hard to receive the same recognition as some of her peers. B-roll footage of a professional woman in business attire entering a federal-looking building. Growing up as the daughter of a public defender in Baltimore, Maya had witnessed firsthand how the justice system could fail those it was meant to protect. This perspective fueled her commitment to upholding the law with fairness and impartiality. She joined the FBI not despite the challenges she knew she would face as a black woman in law enforcement, but because of them, determined to be part of the solution rather than a bystander to ongoing problems. What many people didn't know about Maya was that she also volunteered her weekends with a mentorship program for at-risk youth in Richmond's underserved communities. She believed strongly in the power of representation, showing young girls and boys who looked like her that they could aspire to careers in law enforcement and public service. On the evening of the incident, Maya was returning from a week-long training conference in D.C. where she'd been one of the presenters. She was tired but satisfied, having received excellent feedback on her session about interview techniques for sensitive witnesses. She was looking forward to a quiet weekend at home before diving back into her ongoing cases on Monday. Maya was dressed in civilian clothes, a tailored pantsuit that she'd worn for her presentation earlier that day. Her FBI credentials were tucked in her purse on the passenger seat, along with her service weapon, secured in its holster as regulations required. Her badge was in her wallet, alongside her driver's license, a routine she had followed countless times before. Music shifts to something more contemplative. What Maya couldn't have anticipated was that her professional identity, the very badge she wore with such pride and responsibility, would soon become the center of a confrontation that would test her training in ways she never expected. The incident that was about to unfold would call upon every ounce of her professional discipline and personal courage. As the police cruiser's lights flashed behind her car that evening, Maya felt that familiar knot in her stomach, the one that forms when you know that no matter your accomplishments or position, to some, you will always be judged first by the color of your skin. It was a feeling she had hoped would diminish over time, but experiences had taught her otherwise. What she didn't know was that this particular traffic stop would prove more consequential than any she had experienced before. Transition to nighttime scene with flashing police lights. Music becomes tense. It was just after 8 p.m. when Officer James Keller activated his cruiser's lights behind Maya's sedan. Keller, a 5-year veteran of the Richmond Police Department, had been having what his colleagues would later describe as a rough shift. Earlier, he'd been called to a domestic disturbance that had ended poorly, and he'd been reprimanded by his sergeant for his aggressive approach with the suspects. Maya signaled immediately and pulled over onto the shoulder of Chamberlain Avenue, a well-lit but not particularly busy road at that hour. She placed both hands on the steering wheel visible and took a deep breath, mentally reviewing the protocol she knew by heart, both as an agent and as a black woman who had been pulled over before. Officer Keller sat in his cruiser for nearly 3 minutes before approaching long enough for Maya to wonder what the issue might be. Had she unknowingly violated a traffic law? Was there something wrong with her car? Through her side mirror, she could see Keller running her plates, his face illuminated by the blue glow of his computer screen. Finally, Keller emerged from his vehicle. From her mirror, Maya could see him adjust his belt and place his hand on his holster, a gesture that immediately raised her alertness level. As a law enforcement officer herself, she knew this wasn't standard procedure for a routine traffic stop unless the officer had reason to believe there was a threat. License, registration, and proof of insurance, Keller demanded without preamble as he approached the driver's side window, his flashlight beam directed aggressively into Maya's eyes, temporarily blinding her. "Good evening, officer," Maya responded calmly, keeping her hands visible on the wheel. "May I ask why I've been pulled over?" "Tail lights out," Keller responded curtly, though Maya knew this wasn't true. She had just had her car serviced the previous week, and all lights were functioning perfectly. "Your documents, please." "Of course. My license and registration are in my purse on the passenger seat, and my insurance information is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now, if that's okay." Maya maintained a deliberate calmness in her voice, following the protocol she'd always adhered to. "Just get them," Keller said impatiently, the beam of his flashlight now scanning the interior of her car. As Maya carefully reached for her purse, she decided to be transparent about her status. It was something she'd done in the past to de-escalate potential tensions. "Officer, I should inform you that I am a federal agent. My credentials are also in my purse along with my service weapon, which is properly secured." This was standard procedure. Law enforcement officers were trained to disclose the presence of firearms during traffic stops to avoid misunderstandings. Instead of acknowledging her statement, Keller's demeanor instantly changed. His hand moved to his weapon, and in a swift motion, he had drawn his gun and was pointing it directly at Maya. "Hand where I can see them." "Now!" he shouted, taking a step back from the window. Music intensifies, heartbeat sound effect. Maya's training kicked in. She immediately raised her hands back to the steering wheel, her heart racing but her exterior remaining composed. "Officer, I'm complying. My hands are visible, and I pose no threat to you," she said clearly, making sure to move slowly and deliberately. "As I mentioned, I am a federal agent with the FBI. I was simply informing you of my status and the presence of my service weapon, as protocol requires." The next few moments would set the stage for a confrontation that would change both their lives forever, all captured by the dashboard camera on Keller's cruiser and the body camera attached to his uniform. Intense music continues. "Get out of the vehicle. Now!" Officer Keller shouted, his weapon still trained on Maya, who remained perfectly still with her hands visible on the steering wheel. "Officer, I'd like to comply with your instructions, but you're currently pointing a weapon at me," Maya replied steadily. "I'm not reaching for anything. I'm not a threat. I'd be happy to step out of the vehicle once you lower your weapon." This measured response seemed to fuel Keller's agitation rather than calm it. Later analysis of the body camera footage would show that Maya's composure and professional demeanor appeared to unsettle him further. "I don't care who you claim to be. Exit the vehicle with your hands up," Keller demanded, using his free hand to reach for his radio to call for backup. "Officer Keller," Maya said, having glimpsed his name tag in the beam of his flashlight. "I am Special Agent Maya Daniels with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I understand you're doing your job, but I need you to understand that I am also a law enforcement officer." There was a tense pause. For a moment, it seemed like Keller might be reconsidering his approach. Then his expression hardened again. "Yeah, right. And I'm the director of the CIA," he scoffed, the derision clear in his voice. "I've heard every excuse in the book. Get out of the car slowly." Maya made a decision, keeping her movements deliberate and narrating each action before she made it. She slowly reached toward her purse on the passenger seat. "I'm reaching for my credentials now. My FBI badge and ID are in my wallet." Her voice remained professional, but there was a new firmness to it, the voice of someone who knew her rights and had made peace with standing her ground. "Stop. Do not reach for anything," Keller shouted, taking half a step closer, his gun still aimed directly at Maya. "Officer, I'm going to prove my identity to you, and then we can de-escalate the situation," Maya continued, her hand pausing but not retreating. "I am moving slowly and transparently. My badge is in my wallet, and I'm reaching for it now." With excruciating slowness, Maya retrieved her wallet and flipped it open to display her FBI badge and identification card, the gold shield gleaming in the beam of Keller's flashlight. Keller stepped forward, keeping his weapon trained on Maya while examining the badge. What happened next would shock viewers of the body camera footage when it eventually became public. Music shifts to something indicating disbelief. Officer Keller laughed. It wasn't chuckle or snort, it was a full, dismissive laugh. "Nice fake ID. Where'd you get it? Internet? These look better every year," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Step out of the vehicle now. You're being detained pending verification of your identity and for further investigation of impersonating a federal officer." The body camera captured Maya's expression, a brief flash of disbelief followed by a resigned understanding, as if this was a scenario she had mentally prepared for but hoped never to encounter. "Officer Keller, this is not a fake ID. This is a legitimate FBI badge issued to me as Special Agent Maya Daniels. You can verify my identity by contacting the Richmond field office. The special agent in charge is Thomas Reynolds. His direct line is in my phone. Save it for the station," Keller replied dismissively. "Exit the vehicle now, or I will forcibly remove you." Maya took a deep breath, centered herself, and spoke with clear authority. "Officer Keller, I'm going to comply with your request to exit the vehicle, but I want to be very clear that you are making a serious error in judgment. I am a federal agent, and your current actions constitute harassment and potentially illegal detention of a federal officer in performance of her duties." She opened the door slowly and stepped out, hands raised slightly away from her body. Sound effect of car door opening. "Turn around. Hands against the vehicle," Keller instructed, holstering his weapon now that Maya was out of the car, but keeping his hand near it. "Officer, before this goes any further, I am requesting that you contact your supervisor immediately," Maya said, comply with his direction but maintaining her composure and authority. "This situation has escalated unnecessarily, and I believe it would be in everyone's best interest to have a senior officer present." "You don't give the orders here," Keller responded, reaching for his handcuffs. "I'm detaining you until we sort this out." It was at this exact moment that the situation took its dramatic turn, the turning point that would make this video go viral and spark nationwide discussions about police conduct, bias in law enforcement, and accountability. Suspenseful music builds to crescendo. Just as Officer Keller was about to place handcuffs on Maya, a second set of flashing lights illuminated the scene. An unmarked sedan pulled up behind Keller's cruiser, its headlights casting long shadows across the pavement. The timing couldn't have been more dramatic. Assistant Special Agent in Charge, ASAC, Marcus Rivera stepped out of the vehicle, his FBI windbreaker clearly visible even in the dim evening light. Maya had texted him a quick SOS message while still in the car safety protocol they had developed within their unit for potentially dangerous situations. Richmond PD, federal agent approaching. Rivera called out in a commanding voice, his own credentials held high. Officer Keller turned, clearly startled by the new arrival, his hand instinctively moving back toward his weapon. "Stand down, officer," Rivera said firmly. "I'm Assistant Special Agent in charge Marcus Rivera, FBI Richmond Field Office. The woman you're detaining is Special Agent Maya Daniels, one of my top agents." Keller froze, his expression captured perfectly by his body camera, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and the dawning realization that he made a catastrophic error in judgment. "I need to see some identification," Keller said, his voice noticeably less confident than it had been moments before. Rivera approached slowly, his credentials extended. "Officer Keller, yes. I can read your name tag. I strongly suggest you step away from Agent Daniels immediately and holster your weapon completely." Keller examined Rivera's credentials, his face paling visibly even in the dim light of evening. "There seems to be some misunderstanding," Keller began, already attempting to backpedal. "I was conducting a routine traffic stop. I heard everything on the phone." Rivera cut him off, gesturing to his pocket where his phone was still connected to Maya's. Agent Daniels followed protocol and identified herself as a federal agent. "She informed you about her service weapon as regulations require, and you responded by drawing your weapon on a fellow law enforcement officer and dismissing her credentials as fake." Music shifts to something indicating a power shift. Keller's body language changed completely. His shoulders slumped, and he took a step back from Maya. The camera captured the moment perfectly to shift from aggressive authority to the realization of serious trouble. Agent Daniels was returning from an official bureau training session in D.C. Rivera continued, his voice level but intense. A training session where, ironically enough, part of the curriculum covered interagency cooperation and professional courtesy. Rivera turned to Maya. "Are you all right, Agent Daniels?" "Yes, sir," Maya responded professionally, though the tension in her voice was evident. "Although I am concerned about Officer Keller's conduct during this stop, he drew his weapon despite no provocation, dismissed my credentials, and was about to detain me without cause." Rivera nodded grimly, then turned back to face Keller. "Officer, I'll need your badge number and the name of your supervising officer. This incident will be reported to your department's Internal Affairs Division and the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division." It was at this precise moment that a third vehicle arrived, a Richmond Police Department supervisor's SUV, responding to the call for backup that Keller had made earlier. Captain Eleanor Walsh stepped out, immediately assessing the tense scene before her. "What's going on here?" Captain Walsh asked sharply, her experienced eyes taking in the FBI windbreaker, Maya's professional attire, and her officer's increasingly uncomfortable stance. "Captain, we have a situation," Rivera said, stepping forward to introduce himself. "Your officer conducted a traffic stop on a federal agent, drew his weapon without cause, refused to acknowledge her credentials, and was about to wrongfully detain her." Captain Walsh's expression darkened as she turned to Keller. "Is this accurate, Officer Keller?" Keller's response was telling a mumbled explanation about suspicious behavior and concerns about fake credentials. The body camera captured his every word, every nervous gesture. "Let me see the credentials in question," Captain Walsh said, turning to Maya. Maya once again produced her FBI badge and ID. Captain Walsh examined them thoroughly, then handed them back with a respectful nod. "These are legitimate federal credentials, Officer Keller," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Something you would have known if you had followed proper procedure." What happened next stunned everyone present, including the growing number of onlookers who had begun to gather at a safe distance, several with cell phones recording. Sound effect of handcuffs. "Officer James Keller, I'm placing you under administrative detention pending an immediate investigation," Captain Walsh announced, removing her own handcuffs from her belt. "You are suspended from duty effective immediately. Please surrender your badge and service weapon." The shock on Keller's face was evident as his own supervisor placed him in handcuffs exactly 2 minutes after Rivera had arrived on the scene, just as the video title would later proclaim. As Captain Walsh secured Keller's weapon and badge, she turned to Maya with a look of genuine regret. "Agent Daniels, on behalf of the Richmond Police Department, I want to extend my sincere apologies for the conduct of my officer. This type of behavior is completely unacceptable and does not reflect the values or training of our department." Maya nodded acknowledgement, her composure never wavering despite the adrenaline that must have been coursing through her system. "I appreciate that, Captain. I understand that Officer Keller's actions don't represent your entire department." The scene that had begun with a routine traffic stop had transformed into something that would soon become a national talking point about law enforcement accountability, racial profiling, and the consequences of unchecked authority. Somber, reflective music. In the days following the incident, the body camera footage was reviewed by Richmond PD's Internal Affairs Division, the FBI Office of Professional Responsibility, and eventually the Department of Justice. The footage, along with the dashboard camera video, painted a clear picture of what had transpired. Officer James Keller was initially placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Within 2 weeks, following expedited reviews of the evidence, he was formally terminated from the Richmond Police Department for multiple violations of department policy, including excessive use of force, failure to follow proper identification protocols, conduct on becoming an officer, racial profiling, as determined by a review of his previous traffic stops, which showed a pattern of disproportionately stopping and searching vehicles driven by people of color. The case quickly gained national attention when portions of the body camera footage were released to the public following Media Freedom of Information Act requests. The viral spread of the video, particularly the moment when Keller laughed at Maya's FBI credentials, sparked renewed conversations about bias in policing and accountability for officers who abuse their authority. B-roll footage of news reports and social media reactions. Maya Daniels, though initially reluctant to become the face of yet another incident highlighting the challenges faced by Black Americans in interactions with law enforcement, eventually decided to speak out. In a measured interview with a national news network, she emphasized that she wasn't interested in vilifying all police officers, but rather in highlighting the systemic issues that allowed someone like Keller to remain on the force despite what the investigation revealed was a history of concerning behavior. "What happened to me that night is something that happens to Black Americans across this country every day," Maya said during the interview. "The difference is that I had a badge. I had a colleague who arrived at the right moment, and I had the full weight of the FBI behind me. Most people don't have those advantages, and their stories often go untold or unbelieved." Cut to interview footage. "I became an FBI agent precisely because I want to be part of making our justice system more just," she continued. "This incident, as uncomfortable and potentially dangerous as it was, has only strengthened my resolve to continue that work." The Richmond Police Department, to their credit, responded to the incident with unprecedented transparency. Captain Eleanor Walsh, who had handcuffed Keller that night, was promoted to lead a newly formed community accountability task force within the department. Their mandate was to review policies, training, and officer conduct with a specific focus on eliminating bias from policing practices. In a joint press conference held 3 months after the incident, the Richmond police chief and the special agent in charge of the FBI's Richmond field office announced a new collaborative training program. The program would focus on interagency cooperation, bias recognition and mitigation, and de-escalation techniques. It would become mandatory for all Richmond officers and was being considered as a model for departments nationwide. As for James Keller, the consequences extended beyond the loss of his job. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division filed charges against him for deprivation of rights under color law, a federal offense that carries significant penalties. Keller eventually accepted a plea deal that included community service, probation, and a permanent bar from serving in law enforcement anywhere in the country. But perhaps the most significant consequence came in the form of legislation. The incident became a rallying point for police reform advocates, who cited it as a clear example of why greater accountability measures were needed. 6 months after the traffic stop, the state legislature passed the Law Enforcement Accountability and Transparency Act, which mandated body cameras for all officers, created civilian review boards with actual power to discipline officers, and established strict penalties for officers who violated citizens' rights. The act, which came to be known informally as Maya's Law, was seen as one of the most progressive police reform measures in the country. Maya herself was invited to speak at the signing ceremony, where she emphasized that the goal wasn't to punish police, but to create a system where everyone, officers and civilians alike, could feel safer and more respected. Uplifting, thoughtful music. In the year following the incident, both Maya Daniels and the Richmond community experienced profound changes. For Maya, the incident initially brought unwanted attention. She had always preferred to work behind the scenes, letting her case results speak for themselves rather than seeking the spotlight. Suddenly finding herself at the center of a national conversation about race and policing was uncomfortable territory. "I didn't become an agent to be famous," she confided to Rivera during a quiet moment in the office a few weeks after the video went viral. "I became an agent to make a difference." "And now you're doing both," Rivera had replied. "Sometimes the cases we're meant to solve find us, not the other way around." Those words stayed with Maya as she navigated her unexpected new role as an advocate for change. Rather than shy away from the platform she had been given, she made a conscious decision to use it constructively. She began speaking at police academies across the country, sharing her experience not as an accusation, but as a learning opportunity for future officers. B-roll footage of Maya speaking to a classroom of police cadets. "What happened that night wasn't just about me and Officer Keller," she would tell cadets. "It was about unconscious biases that can affect anyone's judgment, the importance of proper procedure, and what happens when authority is exercised without accountability. These are lessons that apply to all of us in law enforcement, myself included." Maya's approach, empathetic but uncompromising, personal but professional, resonated with officers and communities alike. She received invitations to consult on police training programs from departments across the country, and eventually, she was asked to join a presidential task force on law enforcement reform. Meanwhile, within the FBI, Maya's handling of the incident earned her newfound respect. Her promotion to supervisory special agent came 6 months ahead of schedule, with her superiors citing not just her exemplary work record, but also her grace under pressure and commitment to positive change in the wake of a traumatic experience. The Richmond Police Department also underwent significant transformation. Under Captain Walsh's leadership, the Community Accountability Task Force implemented sweeping changes to the department's training, hiring practices, and disciplinary procedures. They established one of the country's first mandatory bias training programs that included regular refresher courses and practical scenarios rather than just theoretical discussions. Image of community meeting with police officers and citizens engaged in conversation. Perhaps most importantly, the department worked to rebuild trust with the communities they serve, particularly communities of color that had long experienced disproportionate scrutiny and enforcement. They established regular town halls where citizens could voice concerns directly to department leadership, created a civilian advisory board with actual oversight authority, and implemented a mentorship program pairing officers with youth from underserved neighborhoods. 1 year to the day after the traffic stop, Maya was invited to speak at a community forum hosted jointly by the Richmond PD and local community organizations. The event was held in a community center in one of the city's historically black neighborhoods, a location chosen deliberately to symbolize the department's commitment to meeting communities where they were. As Maya took the podium, she looked out at the mixed audience of police officers, community members, activists, and government officials. She saw faces still skeptical, others hopeful, and many somewhere in between, a microcosm of the complex relationship between law enforcement and the communities they serve. 1 year ago today, I experienced firsthand what too many people in this community have experienced for generations, she began. Being judged not by my actions or character, but by assumptions based on the color of my skin. The difference is that my badge ultimately protected me in a way that ordinary citizens aren't protected. She paused, looking around the room, before continuing. But today isn't about reliving that moment. It's about recognizing how far we've come the year since, and how much further we still have to go. It's about acknowledging that real change is possible when we're willing to have difficult conversations, to hold ourselves and our institutions accountable, and to see each other's full humanity even in moments of tension and disagreement. The room was silent, every person present fully engaged with her words. What gives me hope is that I stand here today not as someone who brought down an officer or exposed a department, she continued, but as a partner in building something better. The changes we've seen in Richmond over the past year didn't happen because of one incident or one person. They happened because an entire community of officers, citizens, officials, activists decided that we could do better, that we deserved better. As Maya concluded her remarks, the applause wasn't just polite, it was genuine, sustained, a recognition of shared purpose despite different perspectives. And sitting in the front row was a familiar face. Captain, now Deputy Chief Eleanor Walsh, the officer who had made the crucial decision to hold one of her own accountable that fateful night. After the forum, Walsh approached Maya with an extended hand. "Agent Daniels, I've been meaning to tell you something for a while now," she said. "That night changed my career, too. It reminded me why I became an officer in the first place, protect everyone in this community equally and fairly. So thank you for being the catalyst for change we needed." Maya shook her hand firmly. "Thank you for having the courage to do the right thing, even when it was difficult. That's what real leadership looks like." As they parted ways, both women knew that the work of reform was far from complete, but they also knew that genuine progress was possible when accountability, respect, and a commitment to justice guided their actions. Inspirational music builds. As our story draws to a close, it's worth reflecting on the profound lessons we can take from Maya's experience and its aftermath. What began as a frightening and potentially dangerous traffic stop transformed into a catalyst for meaningful change. Not because Maya sought vengeance or public attention, but because she chose to channel a negative experience into positive action. She understood that real change doesn't come from tearing systems down, but from working tirelessly to build them back better. The incident reminds us that accountability isn't the enemy of law enforcement. It's essential to its legitimacy and effectiveness. When Officer Keller faced consequences for his actions, it didn't weaken the Richmond Police Department. It strengthened it by affirming that the badge represents a commitment to justice rather than a shield from it. Most importantly, this story shows us that even in our most divided times, progress is possible when we approach problems with honesty, empathy, and a genuine desire to understand perspectives different from our own. The changes in Richmond didn't erase centuries of complicated history overnight, but they created space for new conversations, new relationships, and new possibilities. Music swells slightly, as Maya herself put it in her congressional testimony, supporting national police reform legislation. Justice isn't just about what happens in courtrooms. It's about how we treat each other in everyday interactions, whether we see each other's full humanity, whether we extend grace and dignity to one another, whether we hold ourselves and our institutions to the highest standards rather than the minimum requirements. Those words remind us that each of us, regardless of our position or profession, has the power to be an agent of positive change. We may not all wear badges, but we all have spheres of influence where our choices and actions matter. So the next time you witness injustice, remember Maya Daniels. Remember that one person standing firm in their truth can create ripples that eventually become waves of transformation. Remember that accountability and respect aren't opposing values. They're complementary foundations of a more just society.